Hello, everyone. Welcome to Pollinator Happy Hour, our very first one. I'm Christina from AdkAction. As you all come in and get settled, you'll see you're automatically muted, just so we don't get any background noise. But feel free to replace your background with a favorite pollinator, as several of our partners have done, if you are so inclined. We're really happy to have you here. I'm going to pass it over to Brittany Christensen of AdkAction in just a moment, but first I wanted to welcome you all with a little toast. If you got a recipe that I created, we made two drinks, both a cocktail and a mocktail. So I am having the Blue Orchard Mule because it features Honeycrisp apples grown nearby at Rolf's Orchard in Peru. And Brittany, can you tell me just a little fact about the Blue Orchard mason bee?
Absolutely. So blue orchard bees are an increasingly well-known alternative to honeybees. As some of you may know, honeybees are actually not native to North America. They were brought over from Europe. So the blue orchard bee has really gained popularity. They're prolific in terms of their ability to pollinate both apples and almonds. So we've actually seen even some of the local orchards start to experiment with using these native blue orchard bees to pollinate their orchards, which we're really excited about.
Great. And our other drink that I have here is our mocktail, the Bombus Fizz, which I named because I loved that the genus of all bumblebees was Bombus, which just sounded like a wonderful name to me for a drink. So I can guarantee I'm going to be drinking this all summer long, so you can have it in the middle of the afternoon. It still tastes cocktail-like. But Brittany, you were telling me a little bit about the rusty-patched bumblebee.
Yeah, so unfortunately, the rusty-patched bumblebee is an endangered species. In the past, they have been found in this area. So a couple years ago, those of us on the committee for the pollinator program here showed a nice film about the rusty-patched bumblebee, and they're really beautiful, incredible bees. And you might think that you see one around here, but there's several very similar lookalikes to the rusty-patched bumblebee. But if you ever do notice a big bumblebee with two rusty patches on its bum and not four patches on its bum, it's very likely to be a rusty patch.
Great. Well, now that we've gotten the drinks out of the way for the happy hour part, let's move on to the pollinator part, and I'm going to toss it over to Brittany completely.
All right, wonderful. Well, I can see we've got 55 people and more coming every minute, so this is awesome. We were not sure if folks would want to join us for an early-ish happy hour, but it seems like this time works well for folks, so thank you so much for taking the time. I assume you're all pollinator lovers just like we are. I'd love to start with a little history of the Adirondack Pollinator Project. So back in 2017, AdkAction partnered with the Wild Center, Lake Placid Land Conservancy, and Common Ground Gardens to start the project. And then just a little later on, Paul Smith College came on board with their lovely butterfly house and became our third major partner in place of Common Ground Gardens. And anyway, we've just had a wonderful time over the last several years planning all kinds of programs related to pollinators. You've probably seen our free seed packets. I have a copy right here. With the Zoom background, it's disappearing a little bit. But we give out free seed packets. We've given out over 70,000 free seed packets, which is pretty incredible when you think about the scale of that. They contain about 27 different varieties of native wildflower plants, almost all perennials. So if you want to request those, you'll be able to at the end of the call today. We also have a really cool pollinator garden trailer. We launched the pollinator garden trailer 2 years ago, and we took it on the road and installed 10 pollinator gardens. We had to take a break last year because with the timing of COVID, it didn't feel very responsible to get a bunch of volunteers together. But we've reinstated the program for this summer. So our pollinator assistance application is open right now. It actually closes on the 15th. So if you have a workplace, or if you're on the board of a library or something like that, and you want to apply for pollinator garden assistance, we'd love to extend that application to you, and we'll share a link. And with that, I would love to give our partners an opportunity to talk about their work related to pollinator conservation as well. So Carrie, would you mind telling folks a little bit about Lake Placid Land Conservancy?
Sure, happy to do so. My name is Carrie Crowningshield. I'm the Executive Director of the Lake Placid Land Conservancy. We're a land conservation protection organization based out of Lake Placid, but our focus areas includes all of the Ausable and Saranac River valleys. So essentially the northeastern section of the park is where we do our work. So we do traditional land conservation projects, conservation easements, and we hold a couple of preserves with hiking trails and mountain biking trails. But our work related to pollinators really focuses a lot on some of the garden planning that we do, some of the outreach we do with different partners and landowners. So last year, we are fortunate enough to be able to place a conservation planting in New York at Douglas Park, where the covered bridge is, where we converted a sizable portion of the lawn that they had there into bird conservation habitat, but it also doubles as pollinator habitat as well, because it's essentially some really great native pollinator plants that we installed there. So we do a lot of that sort of boots on the ground type of work. And we also host a iNaturalist program outreach training as well, to kind of get landowners and community members engaged with the habitat that's around them. So iNaturalist is a program that's an app for your smartphone that's free, and essentially it lets you take photographs of plants and animals that are around you, and helps you identify them and log them. But essentially it converts you into a citizen scientist in a super fun and engaging way. So that's some of the program that we do a lot with community members and kids, and with our partners.
Thank you so much, Carrie.
Thanks.
Now I'll turn it over to Martha from Paul Smith College.
Thanks, Brittany. Hi, everybody. Thanks very much for coming. I'll be super quick. Those of you who have been to the VIC know that our 3,000 acre property is just one big giant native habitat for pollinators. And we showcase that with our botanical gardens that are in the front and the back. And I know at least one member of our garden squad is here. Thank you for helping us get all of that into native plantings, because it hasn't always been. And of course, our showcase is the butterfly, native species butterfly house, where we can talk to you about all kinds of host plant insect relationships. So that's our signature project that we'd love to share with everybody. So come out and see us this summer, please.
Great, thank you so much, Martha. And also Jen Kretzer, would you please talk about the Wild Center's pollinator programs?
Sure. Hi, everybody. Welcome. My name's Jen Kretzer. I'm the Director of Climate Initiatives for the Wild Center in Tupper Lake. So happy to see some familiar names and smiling faces today. And I love thinking about spring right now. So we've been involved with the Pollinator Project from the very beginning, and have been, I for one am an avid, I've been transforming my entire lawn into a giant pollinator garden. And we've been working at the Wild Center to do all kinds of gardens across our site and be a demonstration site. We have done tons of programs in the past with in partnership with this group, including hosting speakers and films like Flight of the Butterfly, which you haven't seen. If you haven't seen, you can still find on, I believe, Netflix, or I think if you Google Flight of the Butterfly, it's one of my favorite nature films of all time. We do monarch raising and tagging each year with our guests. And of course, just connecting with nature is what we do and who we are as an institution. And so pollinators are, I guess, baked right into our DNA. So we're happy to be here and be a part of this project. So thanks so much.
All right, wonderful. So we're really, really glad to have these partners here with us. I'm also just going to share my screen really quick so you can see everybody's logos. So thank you to our partners. And now I'm going to introduce our special guest today. We've got Christian Ost, the owner of Cook and Gardner Nursery. And I love this photo because this was a couple years ago. Christian's been helping us with our annual pollinator plant sale. Many of you may have purchased plants in the past, or maybe you just purchased plants this year. But we had some big questions when we first started the plant sale. How do we source plants that have never been touched by neonicotinoids, for example? How do we make sure that we're selecting the right types of species for our area? And Christian not only helped us answer those questions, but he actually propagated the plants for us for the first several years of the event. So this photo was right after Christian and I loaded up a big truck to bring the plants up to the Wild Center for distribution. So welcome, Christian, and thank you for being with us today.
Sure, thanks. Yeah, no, it's been great to be involved. Perennials, in particular, we grow a lot of plants, but perennials are my thing, and native plants. It's not necessarily something that I've always been involved with, but certainly trying to get ahead of the curve and showing people that you can do beautiful things and provide for pollinators at the same time.
Yeah, that's so wonderful. Well, what we're going to do now is we're going to split off into some breakout rooms because we have so many people on the call and we want to make sure that this is a two-way street. We want to have communication with all of you. So we're going to break off into breakout rooms, and what we're going to ask you to do is just, you'll have one of the partners in your breakout room, and we'll help facilitate. But we're just going to have everyone introduce themselves and then tell us a little bit about where you're at in your pollinator gardening journey. Are you hoping to start one for the first time this year, or have you been gardening this way for your entire life? I hope you enjoyed getting to know each other a little bit. I know my group had a lot of fun talking about where we're all at in our pollinator gardening journey. And some questions came up that I'm looking forward to posing to Christian. So I think we've got everyone back in here. Can I get a thumbs up, Christina, if we're all set to begin? Looks good. Okay, wonderful. Wonderful. So because there are so many of us on the call, what we're going to do is ask you to put your questions in the chat bar. So if you're not that familiar with Zoom, if you mouse along the bottom of your screen, there is a little bubble icon and the word chat. So if you just click there, you'll get a sidebar that pops up, and you can pop your questions in there at any time throughout the discussion. And we'll do our best to kind of categorize them and pose those back to Christian. But before we take the first questions, feel free to put your questions in right away if you know what they are. But before we do that, I just wanted to share just a couple of slides about some of my personal favorite pollinator plants. I know that the title of the presentation today is Learn to Identify and Care for Native Flowering Plants. But I think that there are so many amazing resources, especially the Ladybird Johnson Foundation has a native plant guide online. There's also another one from the Missouri Botanical Gardens, and they're nearly encyclopedic. And so we pull a lot of our information from those sources. So instead of spending too much time on that, I'm just going to go over some favorites, and then we'll start to ask Christian our questions. So bear with me 1 second while I pull this up and share my screen. Okay, so you'll see here, we've got this resource that we've developed. And again, we want to credit Ladybird Johnson and wildflower.org for a lot of this information, but we've compiled some great natives that work really well in our area, starting with the Eastern Red Columbine. We put this one first because they start blooming in the springtime. They come up quite early, and these are one of the flowers that you'll see if you're just out and about for a hike. So it's a true native that you see growing around here anyway. They're really, really lovely right at the edge of the forest. So if you have maybe a forested backyard that kind of fades into your grass, they're really nice right at that edge. They attract bees, butterflies, and hawk moths. So if you don't know what a hawk moth is, you should Google them. They're amazing. We're going to send out this 6-page resource that has some of our favorites after the call. So I won't go into it too in depth, but just know that you'll have access to this resource that you can use. You can print it out. You can take it with you to the nursery. A couple of other favorites, clustered mountain mint. It smells very lovely. The native bees and bumblebees love it. If you have any honeybee hives nearby, they'll certainly come and visit. They get pretty nice and bushy. They really fill out a garden well, 3 feet tall, 3 feet wide. Also just want to highlight the great blue lobelia. They really are great in blue. They bring such bright pops of color to the garden. Everyone probably knows about swamp milkweed because it is the larval host for monarchs, which we all care so much about and want to protect. You'll also see native bees and bumblebees and honeybees visiting swamp milkweed. So again, I don't want to spend too much time on this because I think that we'll just send this out to you after and you can look through it at your leisure and learn a little bit. So look for that in the follow-up email. And we're also going to send out this other resource. And a big thanks to AdkAction board member Chris Cohan for helping develop this. But it's just kind of a high-level overview of how to add plants to an existing garden if you're looking to expand your garden for pollinators, or how to create a new pollinator garden from scratch. Just some really basic getting started instructions for you there. Finally, we're going to send you some garden designs. So here's an example. Again, thanks to Chris Cohan on our board. He's a landscape architect, and so he put these together for us for one of our plant sales in past years. But there's a nice diagram and then some plant listings, and it's always nice to have a little bit of a guide in mind when you're starting from scratch. So you're going to receive the 4 pollinator garden designs that you can use this spring. So that being said, I think that we've gotten some great questions in the chat so far. And Christian, I just want to start with the question that you get a lot, I'm sure, which is what pollinator plants that are truly deer resistant can you recommend?
Sorry. Yeah, on your list, mountain mint is fantastic. So that would be one that just comes to mind right away. You know, it does need a bit of room, but if you have room, it will spread. It's related to bee balm. So if anyone has grown bee balm, it's a similar plant, although I find that it's, you know, the reality is we have a garden center and people are somewhat interested in many cases with aesthetics as well. And so the mountain mint is much less prone to foliar diseases, you know, fungal problems that seem to plague bee balms all the time. So yeah, that would be number one, a very good choice. Other ones, yarrow is another one, and echinaceas tend to, you know, there are a bunch of them. It seems like a lot of introduced plants are going to be the ones that are particularly palatable. Things like hostas, that sort of stuff, daylilies that have been introduced that, you know, the deer are going to definitely go for those.
Okay, thank you. In the small breakout room I was in, we were joking about how it depends on how hungry the deer is. So if they're desperate, they'll eat just about anything. But there's certainly some that are more deer resistant than others. Okay, Christian, another question that came up for you. Cynthia says, we have so much shade in our place in Essex. Do you recommend any pollinator friendly plants for shady spots?
Well, and that's where it depends as well. So if it is shade from evergreens, admittedly, that can be very tricky, and I'd have to think about it more. There are some native geraniums, for instance. The species is maculatum. That one is pretty tough. It will grow in a dry shade that you would often find underneath, in evergreens. If it's just a deciduous tree shade, there are a lot of plants that do their business in the spring before the trees leaf out, and some of them will last longer than others. A really good one would be the foam flowers, Tiarella. If you want something to form a really nice mat, keep weeds down and less work in the long term. And it's also, it looks nice and it's great for pollinators as well. It looks really good with the native phlox too, the varicata. So a mixture of foam flower and phlox is really stunning actually when it comes into bloom together in the spring.
Oh, that's great. Thank you. I didn't even know that. Always learning something new. Suzanne wants to know if there's specific native plants that are endangered that we should be planting to help both the plant and the pollinator. That's a really good question, Suzanne. I want to pose that to all of our pollinator project partners on the call, as well as Janet, our moth expert, in case you know. Does anybody have anything in mind there? Nothing comes to mind for me in terms of native plants that are threatened here.
I think this is Carrie from Lake Placid Land Conservancy. So my feeling is that regarding native plants, they're really habitat specific. So to Christian's point, if you're looking at plants that are, underneath evergreens or underneath deciduous trees, our natives really like to grow where they're, where they've been growing for years. So underneath evergreens, it might be like native bellwort or ginger or something like that. Bloodroot tends to be in really like in the deciduous trees where there's a thick leaf layer or something like that. But really the biggest threat to them maybe is less in terms of what's endangered and more in terms of how habitat is being converted from, traditional forest or traditional woods to somebody's front yard, somebody that's replacing traditional woods with mowed lawn. So that's where reintroducing or, converting some of your habitat back to maybe less tailored gardens or reintroducing some, taller shrubs or trees like serviceberries, which have a lot of ecological value. A lot of our native plants, say some of our lady slippers, they can be held dormant for decades in the soil, and they'll pop out as soon as the habitat conditions are right. So I guess that's more of my opinion on that.
That's great, Carrie. Thank you so much. Those pink lady slippers are so beautiful. I just love them. And it's interesting the way that they're pollinated. They actually draw the bees in. And then, and if you're not familiar with what it looks like, it looks like an orchid. They've got these kind of large bulbous regions. And when the bees go into the pink lady slipper, they actually get stuck and they often kind of search around for their way out. It's harder to get out than it is to get in. And then they get pollen stuck to their back on the way out. So those ones are lovely and special and really good to know that they can lay dormant so long. I have some favorite hiking spots where I like to go and see those. Oh, nice. There's a picture right there. Thanks, Carrie. So that's a yellow lady slipper. But yeah, wonderful. Okay, very good question. I also, we can send out the Native Plant Protection Act information because there are good listings online for native plant protection. So that can help anyone who wants to go a little deeper into that question, learn more. The next question that we have comes from Kimberly. She has a lot of open areas with direct sunlight. So Christian, what are some of your favorite plants that love full sun?
It's hard to go wrong with, well, echinacea is great, purple coneflowers. So then you're looking at natives that, are more sort of meadow-ish. I think, and I thought it was great that as part of your plant list for this season that you had a bunch of different goldenrods on there that I think a lot of people still are, they get scared of the idea of goldenrod, giving hay fever, that sort of thing. And in reality, it is one of the best, the group of goldenrods in general are one of the best nectar sources for all sorts of pollinators late in the season. So, they clearly do extremely well. If you have a large open area that you can let the goldenrod go, it will look beautiful in the fall and be great for the pollinators too.
That's great. Thank you so much. Our next question comes from Henriette. She wonders if there are native pollinator plants that are good to plant in tandem with vegetables. I'll just take one quick stab at that, and then maybe Christian has something to add. But when I used to farm at Fledgling Crow Vegetables, and one year we planted a huge row of peppers and tomatoes, and then we had some honeybee hives near that, and then we just grew cut flowers. And I'd never seen such beautiful peppers or tomatoes in my life, and the flowers were thriving, the bees were thriving, the veggies were thriving. So I think it just as a general rule of thumb, if you plant flowers next to your veggies, especially the native flowers that are going to attract native pollinators, it's going to be good for your vegetable garden. But Christian, I'll let you chime in with anything more specific.
Well, it's tough because the list would be long, just in regards to, if you have plants that are flowering in the summer, you'll want to choose some, again, it could be a purple cone flowers, something that's also going to bloom at around the same time so that you get the pollinators arriving, pollinating both. Another aspect would be that it also, having those plants there can also act to bring in predator insects that can help to keep your peppers clean, for instance, insects that will go after the aphids that will tend to go on your peppers. So there is a synergy that works in a couple different ways there.
Perfect. Our next question from Suzanne is, what native plants like to grow in pots?
It can be tricky because in our region, even if a lot of the native plants that people would be putting in a native garden are going to be perennials, just in our region, there aren't a lot of annuals that are native to this part of the country. So it's mostly perennial plants. And frankly, in containers, just from my own experience, it is hard to overwinter perennials properly. So if they are large containers that tend to stay outside, it can be hard. And while I definitely would promote the use of natives, there are places where, growing some annuals in a container that provide pollen, provide nectar. They may not be native, but it's something that will actually work. And so that would be a good place for using annuals. Not to say that perennials won't work, but it can be tough to get those to last more than a season in a container that would stay outside.
And I was going to chime in a little. This is a good place where you bring in, to Christian's point, some of the herbs. So some of the mints, oregano, those provide a lot of great pollen and nectar. And they're great potted plants as well. You can put them in the ground, but they're great deck plants for those people that don't have as much room. So it's a good option.
That's a great point, Carrie.
Yep.
And I'll just add from personal experience too, that sometimes even if a plant is native to your zone, if you grow it outdoors in a pot, the temperature can get extra cold in the pot because you don't have the same insulation as you do growing right in the earth. So I've had things that are hardy to our zone actually die over winter in a pot before in my outdoor perennial experiments. We have another question here. Beverly asks, do plants purchased from greenhouses, specifically like daffodils, hyacinths, do those early blooms for pollinators that are already out actually produce pollen? So do daffodils and hyacinths produce pollen is the question.
Well, I can take that. I'll say, a lot of the bulbs, if they are, not to get too much into the botany of things, but if they are single bloom, so a single layer of petals that you can see the middle, there's generally going to be pollen in there. It's when you have they call them usually double form. So a lot of the interior parts of the flower have been transformed into petals. So you get very full flowers. And that's where there's not going to, typically be any pollen in there. And that's true of other, plants later in the season too. So the very, very full roses, for instance, to be honest, there's little pollinator value, I guess, in plants like that.
That's really helpful to have a general rule of thumb. Thank you. Let's see, we have a question about kind of the accepting the rewilding consequences. So Stephanie says, if I plant a patch of wildflowers like the ones from your seed packets, should I accept and assume a grass takeover over time and replant? And I would say from experience, to some degree, yes. What you'll find is that with the seeds that we give out in our plant sale, you might notice that that certain, there's 27 different varieties, and some of the varieties will do better in different environments. So in some particular environments, the native grasses might do better and take over, or you might have a grass that's already growing in the area that outcompetes some of these. You'll find other areas where you'll have, for example, the goldenrod will be really successful, and you'll see much more goldenrod come up than some of the other species. But I do think that as a general rule, when you are trying to rewild, you should remember that the native grasses can have a lot of pollinator value as well, and certainly just keep trying. Think of it as an iterative process. And something that I found really, really helpful over time is just inserting additional plants, not added seeds, because sometimes the seeds will have a hard time taking hold if it's a really established grassy area already. But you can cut like a 3-inch by 3-inch square in the sod and then insert a landscape plug. And as long as you weed around it for that first season, a lot of times that'll take over and help to kind of diversify the more meadowy areas. Anne asks, can you recommend bushes that are native pollinator attractors and that grow in the shade?
Well, I know here, for instance, we have like a good one is summer sweet. I will say, in areas like further further up in the mountains, it might not be as successful, but that's a really good one because it blooms in the summer when really, especially in shady areas, all the spring ones are kind of finished and the fall flowers like the asters haven't really started. So that, if it will work in your sort of microclimate, summer clethra, that's a good one.
I can add a few to that if that's okay. I would say serviceberry is a pretty great like mid-level, like high bush, low tree. Maple leaf viburnum is great. A lot of the viburnum species are native. So, and there's quite a variety that will grow in multiple different microclimates in the Adirondacks. Hobblebush you see that all over trail sides and the high peaks. So that's another one that's pretty great as well. In the valleys, a little bit lower, maybe mountain ash. They have great early pollinator value, but also produce seeds as well. Yeah, so those are a few other varieties.
Great, thanks, Carrie. Thanks, Christian. We have another question about shade-tolerant ground cover. Tamara's looking to do an edge between an open small yard area and an adjacent mixed woods area that's mostly evergreens with sandy soils. So what would you recommend there right on that edge, Christian?
Yeah, a blend is always a good thing. I mentioned foam flower, that's a good one. The native ginger, Canadian ginger, that's a good one that forms a very dense clump. Bunch berries, if you're lucky, if depending on your soil, in some places they will grow fantastically, and others they will not grow at all. It's a little dogwood, so it berries for birds and animals in the fall as well. So those are three that will work. The foam flowers and the gingers are probably easier to grow, but the bunchberry is fantastic if it'll work for you.
Perfect. Jim and Karen have many apples and trillium growing natively under trees. Or I'm sorry, it says May apples and trillium growing under trees. They planted a lily of the valley nearby, which is spreading. Is there a good way to protect the native plants from the lily of the valley?
I mean, Lily of the Valley is very, very dense when it gets going. And I think it's just a question of, whether the others, that probably are a little bit lower in the soil profile can get up through that. I'm not sure. If it's possible for them to poke through, they will cover over the lily of the valley. They'll gather their sunlight for the season and then they'll disappear. I'll be honest, I'm not sure. Lily of the Valley is very dense though, so I'm not sure how well that would work.
Yeah, fair enough. Okay, our next question, Rachel wants to know if we can explain what a landscape plug is. So Rachel, I'm going to share my screen and this will help everyone. So this year in the Adirondack Pollinator Project plant sale, we're selling the landscape plugs, and they're ready to plant. They come in a couple of different sizes. They're usually about 1/2 inch by 2 inches deep. So their roots are starting to be established. They've got some good foliage, but they're not nearly bloom size yet. The reason that they're a really great way to go, especially if you're doing a large area, is you can get more of them for cheaper. So that's always really helpful. They have relatively deep roots that can establish pretty quickly, and they're easy to transport. So really nice for rewilding a meadow or doing a larger area, like I mentioned. So hopefully that helps some. Okay, I think, let's see, are there more questions? Okay, here we go. Here's a question from Chris. If an entire generation of monarch caterpillars has been destroyed by spraying, how long will it take for the monarchs to come back to the milkweed garden? So that's a good question. I don't have experience with that directly, although I can say we did work with some folks who lived near power lines, and the owners of the power lines, the power company, came through on a 7-year cycle to spray very heavily underneath the power lines. And anecdotally, I learned that the milkweed came back and had caterpillars the next season, which I thought was really incredible. So I can share that one anecdote, but anyone else who wants to chime in with insights is welcome to.
Somehow I think they have in their genes, they come back to the same area each time, or they migrate through the same area each time. So my friend lost her whole generation by spraying, and we lost ours because a stupid person that didn't know that the caterpillars were good saw them eating of plants and killed them all. So that might come back sooner than spraying, because I've never sprayed my garden, but I still have nowhere near, after about 4 years, I still have nowhere near as many as we used to have, even though I have more milkweed than ever. It's very sad.
I'm sorry to hear that. That must have been heartbreaking.
Keep trying.
Yeah, keep trying and just keep the spray away in the future, right?
Oh, it wasn't my house. No, the spray is somebody else.
Right.
No, mine was the assassination.
Okay, our next question, Aaron Griffith wants to know, or Griffin, sorry, Aaron, what type of yearly maintenance or care would an established pollinator garden need? We inherited a fantastic garden and haven't done much besides water and weed. So, Christian, do you want to speak to that?
Well, the ultimate would be practically nothing. In large part, leaving a lot of the what would previously have been considered debris, leaving that up for the winter. It actually provides a lot of nesting and overwintering sites for insects. Unfortunately, in my case, voles are another issue, so I have to deal with that some other way. But and then it slowly will decay over the winter, and in the spring, for the most part, the new growth will emerge from that. So if you do have a good ground cover in place, ideally, you can use wood chips, that sort of thing, as things get started. But the goal would be, in time, if you have ground cover plants that will fill in the space around your other taller, sort of landscape elements. If it grows thick enough, then really, maybe just to kind of boost things, you can apply an organic fertilizer, and at most, and even then, that's not always necessary. It depends on how your soil is and the site that you've chosen to plant in. So long term, the goal would be that there would be very little need for maintenance, and it just can take a while to get things going so that the ground is covered and the weeds are kept down. But in time, it should be self-sustaining.
That's great. Yeah, really the beauty of native gardens. You're planting plants that know how to thrive here in this region, in this environment. So it's 4:56, and to respect everyone's time, we're gonna start to wind down. I know we have a couple of last questions, so I'm just gonna pick one of the remaining questions because I know Christian has spoken to me really articulately about this in the past, but the question is about neonicotinoids. And I'll just broaden it a little bit. What can you, so one of the reasons we started our plant sale and worked with Christian in the beginning to get the plant sale going was that there are not labeling requirements for neonicotinoids, and which is a class of insecticide that can be very harmful, not only for pollinators, but there's new studies showing that that it can also be harmful for children, especially who eat a lot of fruit, and that the pollinators have gone back and forth between the fruit and the plants. So Christian, what can you say about selecting plants free of neonics, and if someone does plant with neonics, have they done a big disservice, or just more broadly, can you speak to neonics and their prevalence in gardening plants?
I will say that there is a lot less than there was, let's say, 5 years ago. So that is a good thing. It is admittedly very hard to make sure that plants are neonic free unless if you buy from a grower who the chains on some of the plants that come through garden centers can be very long, beginning in places in Central America and in Africa where cuttings are grown, and the reality is that in those places the environmental regulations are not as strict, and so there can be all sorts of things applied. I know that things are changing in those places, but it is a delay compared to in the United States and Canada or Europe. Growing things from seed is a good way to know for sure, or to sort of make sure that there's less of a residue within a plant. Timing and dosing is also very important too. If it's right when a plant is about to bloom, that can be bad. Whereas if it's something that was applied early on before and it could have dissipated, I think there's still a lot of work to be done. But seed grown is sort of the sure way to do things.
Great, thank you so much. And of course, if anybody wants to expand their gardens this year, feel free to go over to Cooking Gardener. You'll find Christian there almost every day of the week. I don't think I've lived there. I've never been there when you weren't there. And he's really generous with his time. So please visit the nursery and support Christian. And I just want to thank our partners and thank Christian for being on the call, and thank all of you for taking the time out of the sunny afternoon to join us. I'll point you over to adkAction.org/pollinators. That's where you'll find information about our partners, our impact, an opportunity to request free seeds and learn about our pollinator garden program, as well as a really wonderful virtual garden tour that Lake Placid Land Conservancy helped us configure. You can also register for the next 2 Pollinator Happy Hours at adkAction.org/pollinators. So there's one coming up on May 4th and another on June 1st. We're going to send out all the great resources that were mentioned in the call today. And Christina is also going to create a URL that'll be adkAction.org/pollinator happy hour that'll have just the most relevant resources that we mentioned and that we send out in the email. So that's not live yet, but you'll receive a follow-up with all of that information. So with that, I thank you again for your time. I encourage you to make the cocktails. I'm drinking the virgin version, but it's absolutely delicious. So thanks to Christina for her ingenuity here, and have a great afternoon.
Happy spring, everybody.
Yeah, happy